And welcome to another edition.
Radio.
Hang on.
And welcome to another edition of Carnivore Radio. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin, and we were looking at a special show today, Dr. Lopkin. We'll see if that unfolds.
Yes, we're expecting Scot Esdaile, who's president of the Connecticut chapters of the NAACP, with us. And while we wait for him, Lord knows there's a lot of news going on.
There's no question. I think the biggest news of the day is the economic numbers, which surprised everyone. Everyone was aghast. Everything ranging from 20% unemployment to, well, basically that was what people were expecting, weren't they, Dr. Lopkin?
Yeah, the estimates were that we were going to lose about 9 million jobs, and instead we gained 2.8 million. So you're talking about literally a 12 million job shift.
Yeah, I found that amazing. Obviously, Trump had his press conference. Couldn't help himself. I do think that has an impact on the election because no matter whose fault it is, I mean, you can look at Jimmy Carter. We're not getting into the hostage crisis, but you look at the economy in the late 70s was awful. Was it his fault or not? Well, history will judge. But I guess my point is, if the economy continued to spiral, I think increasingly Trump his reelection chances would go with that. Don't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. This was, even though, let's not lose sight of the fact unemployment is still at over 13%, so it's still very, very high. But this was the single largest job gain in history. And people did not expect to get these jobs back for several months yet. So the fact that the economy is starting to come back as the states reopen is a very good sign for people.
There's no question about it, and something that I didn't expect, not that I'm an expert, but experts did not expect it. And I think you don't want to put, the cart before the horse, but it's certainly, I would have to say, you can't help but saying it's somewhat encouraging.
Oh, it's definitely encouraging because it shows that the economy will bounce back. That was something, when people looked at this as a recession, they were talking about a recovery of years. But the fact of the matter is this is more akin to a natural disaster, like a hurricane, earthquake, just on a much larger scale. And now we're seeing that the recovery does seem to be following the pattern of a natural disaster.
Yes, actually, Trump was right on that one. It seems to be because the overall foundation of the economy before this happened was good. I still thought, and again, it's just interesting to me that, I thought in spite of, the good fundamentals before this disaster, pandemic, I really thought that things were really going to spiral. I was really, really pleasantly surprised, by the way, on how well things did. Your thoughts?
Yeah, everybody has been looking at the economic growth going, okay, it can't continue, and it kept continuing. And even though there were setbacks, there are setbacks in every economy, overall, the numbers remain strong. And I think that's a big part of why the jobs are coming back so quickly now. That, and you cannot discount the power that the stimulus package had, giving the small businesses loans.
I think that stopped the bleeding, Dr. Lopkin. What do you think? I think
Yeah,
it's like a triage. I think if we didn't have that, who knows? I think history will be the judge of that as well. Was it wasted money? Was it not? We don't know. But my belief is that it did help stop the bleeding.
Yeah, the stimulus package was basically a tourniquet. It stopped the bleeding quick. Had we not done that, the bleeding would have been much worse. Jobs would not have come back. This allowed at least some businesses to rehire the people they furloughed as they're reopening. Honestly, it's still not enough. Right now, the enhanced unemployment benefits are scheduled to run out at the end of July. They just adapted the PPP to give people a longer-term plan, but I still think there's going to need to be another stimulus package. Otherwise, we're looking at more pain come August, September.
I don't know about that one, Dr. Lopkin. Obviously, you are the doctor of the show, but I think if momentum continues, Trump talked about another stimulus. I don't really know if it's needed. I mean, if momentum, two-thirds of the economy is in people's brains. And if they think things are getting better, I think that's huge. This is really, you cannot underestimate how huge this event was, Dr. Lopkin, in terms of the good numbers today. It could have been so much worse. Massive.
The problem is we'll see how quickly the rest of the economy opens. Certain states are opening up very quickly. Those local economies will recover a lot faster. Here in the Northeast, New York is just starting phase 1 next week. In Connecticut, we're between phase 1. We're waiting for phase 2 on the 20th. If the rollout continues to be very slow, then those jobs are not going to come back fast enough to support consumer spending. And if that happens, that's when we need the new stimulus package. The other problem is, as we were hoping to talk with our guests, there are a lot of small businesses that have been affected by riots. That's going to slow down things. Obviously.
Yeah, let me interject something about that because you have a really good point. When I say that, two-thirds of the economy is between your ears, I mean that. I mean, let's just say things from the pandemic, the economic recovery is doing okay. People still are influenced, and we'll talk about the political ramifications a little later in the show, but they're still influenced by unrest. I mean, you look at this, it has an impact in terms of people don't like uncertainty. Economists always say uncertainty is a huge situation. And these riots, these protests have been going on for over a week now. And I just heard on the news that in Washington, D.C., they look for the biggest protest of all tonight. This is not ending.
The protests are not going to go away. And to be fair, the protests really shouldn't go away until the issues that they're bringing up start to get dealt with. However, we have seen a drop, fortunately, in the rioting and looting. And that's the negative part of this that's affecting the economy. The peaceful protests, they're not an economic factor. They're a factor in bringing social justice. They're a factor in bringing the issues to light. But they're not going to hold back the economy. In fact, hopefully, when people start addressing issues of pay equality, employment equality, education inequality, that hopefully this will all boost the economy. But it was the rioters and the looters that were causing problems with it. And,
I would agree with that.
We're still waiting on our guests, but if you'd like to call in and be part of the conversation, you can call us at 563-999-3693. That's 563-999-3693.
One thing about the protests that I found very interesting, as juxtaposed to earlier protests, let's say from the 1960s, is the broad coalition, especially of young people that are firmly just really committed to social equality. I find that encouraging.
Yes, you've got a broad base of support for these protests. And in many of these protests, the police are marching with the protesters, standing with the protesters. They're opening dialogues, which is fantastic, because the one thing we cannot lose sight of is George Floyd's death was horrific. This was a tragedy that should never have happened. And the police who are responsible for this they've already been arrested. They should be brought to justice, prosecuted, and we'll see what sentence they get. But it is important to remember that all police are not like this. Just the way when all the protesters are not rioters and looters. That was a small group that was causing trouble. And it's important to remember that we have more in common than we have separating us, and we need to work together.
Yes, I would agree with that. And you talk about the actual incident. I've seen obviously many incidents in terms that have caused protests or even more violent or extreme riots. This, you just shake your head. I mean, I've never seen anything like this. It was murder. I mean, my point is sometimes, and I'm not condoning these actions, someone, was grabbing for a gun or running towards a policeman. I'm not saying gray area, but this was just unbelievable.
No, this was absolutely horrific. And as more information comes out, now I don't want to stoke conspiracy theories or anything like that, but it has come out that both George and the police officer both worked as security guards at the same nightclub, so they clearly knew each other, which means there might actually have been a personal animus at work here, which is even worse because that makes this premeditated murder.
No, it makes it worse for the police person.
Yes.
But I think.
Well, I don't know that it can get any worse for George Floyd. I mean.
No. What I'm trying to say is at least it might, if it's more of a personal, it might quell a little bit the racial fire or aspect of it.
No, I don't think it has on the racial aspect of it. I am absolutely sure that this man was a racist, and that could have been the basis for why there were personal problems. But the fact of the matter is, there is absolutely no excuse for this behavior. But if it is a spur of the moment thing, it's horrific. If it's premeditated, it's even worse.
Yeah, my only point, Dr. Lopkin, was if there was a personal animosity between them beyond, obviously beyond the race card, but there was something going on, a rivalry or something or whatever, at least, because I'm looking to elevate things, to get beyond the racial tension, that maybe it was just personal and not a racial situation, but I guess looking at the tape, it's hard not to think that it is not racial.
As much as I would love to believe that, I don't think there's any doubt in anyone's mind. Yeah, I mean,
I'm just hoping against hope, obviously.
Yeah, everybody who's talked about George Floyd has talked about what a peaceful person he was, what a wonderful person he is. You'll notice nobody has come out and said nice things about this officer. Nobody has said, I can't believe he did this. I thought he was such a nice guy. There's been nothing of that. So, I mean...
No, he's also had a big history of, let's say, questionable incidents.
Right.
in terms of, I'm surprised he hasn't been suspended or other things. But, yeah, I guess we're coming up on a break, I believe, Dr. Lopkin.
We actually are. We'll be right back after this word from our sponsor.
Why was the basketball court all wet? Because the players has dribbling on it.
The dad joke. Corny, groan-worthy, but also one of the simplest ways to share a moment with your kids.
What did the buffalo say when he dropped his son off at school? Bye, son.
So take a moment to make your kid laugh, because dad jokes rule. Make your kid laugh today. Go to fatherhood.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Well,
and we're back.
To
if
Carnivore.
you want to be part of the conversation, you can call us at 563-999-3693. That's 563-999-3693.
And Dr. Lopkin, how did it come out that these people might have known each other before? Because that's news to me. And just to clarify, the only thing I was kind of suggesting or thinking about is maybe it was beyond a racial incident, but just maybe a personal incident, that they had a conflict or there was a problem between the two. How did they know that they knew each other? I didn't see that.
I've actually seen it reported in a couple of places. ABC News reported it. I saw something on CNBC about it. So it's been in a number of news media have covered that fact.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Well, and then the other police officers were also arrested, and I think that was more than deserving. I mean, how do you stand by to see something like that?
Well, actually, they should have been arrested. I'm not so sure about the charges that should be brought against them. Each of the police officers that stood by were brand new to the force. They were literally, some of them were on I think one was on his fourth shift. One was only a few days on the force. All of the reports have said they did say something and were completely ignored and pushed away. Now, I was an auxiliary officer in the NYPD, and I know there are people on the force that should never be on the force. However, it's a very small percentages, thank heaven. But when you're new, it is very difficult for you to stand up to a seasoned officer, even one with as horrific a record as this one. So
yeah,
you
might not even know
they might have had problems.
Yeah, you might not even know his record, number one. Number two, you're new to a job. I mean, let's not talk about being in the police department. You're new to a marketing position, a teaching position, secretarial. I mean, it's kind of hard to, they should have done more, but I think they were in a very, very, very bad situation. Obviously, they should be fired, and it does point to a lack of training in the Minneapolis police force, doesn't it, Dr. Lopkin?
Yes. It definitely points to a lack of training, a lack of sensitivity. According to the statements that were released, one of the police officers did try to get them to turn George Floyd over so that the cop's foot wasn't on his throat. Another tried to get restraints and get him away. So there were actions taken, but not nearly enough.
Yeah, when you look at that, though, forget about police training, forget about that you're new on the job. You're seeing someone getting essentially murdered. You need to intervene. I mean,
yes.
Yes. I mean, they were new to the job. Go ahead.
As I said, they should be arrested. Their involvement should be investigated. All I'm saying is I'm not sure technically what charges should be brought.
True. Don't know. Obviously, a lot. I would say, relatively compared to the perpetrator, obviously a more minor charge. Obviously,
right. And if
now,
there happens to be anybody with a legal background listening and would actually have a better idea of what charge could be brought, please give us a call at 563-999-3693.
Yes, good. Now, looking as we look into the protests and the subsequent riots, how would you critique President Trump's performance and actions? What would you give him as a grade, teacher?
As a grade, I would give him, I would say, probably a C minus, possibly a D plus.
I was giving him a D.
Skills, his communication skills on this has been absolutely horrific. His idea of making the military available to the governors, which was the first thing he did, was the correct idea. That if the National Guard was deployed and if riots were still out of control, they were offering, more resources. The way he did it, and then the way he berated the governors, was absolutely incomprehensible.
You know something? I saw ex-President Obama, former President Obama's address, whatever you want to call it, and I was not the biggest Obama fan during his tenure, but it was juxtaposed his address to Trump's. There was a huge disparity. I mean, Trump really failed in terms of any attempt of bringing the country together. I think he exasperated things, and I think this might have been quelled earlier, possibly, but Trump certainly, by any stretch of the imagination, did not help.
No, Trump did not help at all. Obama has always been a fantastic communicator. However,
yes, he has.
I will push back on people who are saying that Trump was the first president that did not try to unite the country, because Obama was always quick to blame the Republicans, to blame the folks on the right, to shift blame. He was not a uniter. He was always blaming somebody else for what was going on. And let's not forget the fact that for the first 2 years of his presidency, he and the Democrats had complete control of government, and they did nothing to address any of these issues. So I think it's very ingenuous for him to come out now and criticize.
Well, I think he's looking at an opportunistic situation, because let's face it, Trump and Obama literally hate each other. George W. and Obama might have been diametrically opposed in many areas, but they did not personally hate each other. Trump and Obama literally despise each other, and I think ex-President Obama, former President Obama, saw an opportunity to put fuel on the fire, not in terms of the riots, obviously, but in terms of degrading Trump, that he took that opportunity. Do you agree with that?
I do. There has always been an animosity between Obama and Trump. And, I mean, it was shown in the transition. When George W. Bush transitioned to the Obama presidency, Michelle Obama actually stated over and over again that the Bush president, both George and Laura Bush, their staffers, everybody bent over backwards to make sure the transition was easy. The Trump administration, everybody involved with the transition, that basically Obama took his stuff and left, and there was no assistance, there was no working together. Now, I'm not saying this is Obama's fault. I'm saying it's an evidence of animosity between the two.
Yes, well, also, I think President Obama never really took it personal that Hillary was not elected, because I think it undermined his legacy. And plus, it goes back to the birther issue. Trump was doing that before, I think, Obama, when he was running for president. I mean, they're not really, in love with each other by any stretch of the imagination.
Right. Trump trotted out that ridiculousness. I don't remember if it was during Obama's first campaign or shortly after.
No, it was when he was first campaign when he was running, yes.
Yeah, it was absolutely ridiculous. Trump was going after him then. So, yes, I mean, there has been animosity between the two going that far back. So, again, I'm not blaming, Obama for the animosity. I'm sure, clearly Trump brings this out in a lot of people. But I think it's important to remember that as Obama makes speeches about this, for 8 years he did absolutely nothing.
Yeah, no, that's to some degree true. And, you know, when there was opportunities, he did not seek to unite the country, not all the time, but in some ways, in some measure. Overall, I think it was a good week for Trump. It started out horribly with his actions in terms of the protesters and rioters. But I think the economy solves a lot of problems, doesn't it, Dr. Lopkin?
The economy does put him back on an upswing, but as we've said over and over again, Trump's worst enemy is Trump. It is very easy for him to open his mouth and shoot himself in the foot.
Yeah, I really don't understand that, by the way, as we close out on another edition of Carnivore Radio, is for a person of his age, he's in his 70s, you know, a media-savvy guy, to just do so many stupid, I mean, I just don't understand it. But that's not for me to judge, is it?
Well, I mean, it's for all of us to judge. That's part of our right as American people. That's what makes these protests so great, that people have the right to talk about this, to get out there, make their opinions known. And, I mean, personally, I find it very reassuring that people are willing to step out, to say what they feel, and that it's a diverse group of people that are standing up for what's right. It's not a limited group. You're seeing people from all walks of life, from all races, religions, all across the country. And I really like seeing those protests where the police actually participate and they communicate. We had an issue here in Hartford, Connecticut, that I found very discouraging. During one of the protests, the police chief came out and he literally just tried to open a dialogue. And the group of protesters essentially split. Half of them wanted that dialogue, and that's what we need. But there were a large group of people that all they wanted to do was to shout the police chief down and not communicate. And we're not going to get anywhere if both sides don't communicate.
No, I would agree. I think overall, I know it's nothing we like to see, but in the end, I like your opinion, Dr. Lopkin. This might have advanced racial relations several yards. It advanced it up the field. I think, looking at a broad coalition supporting equal rights, fair justice, and deploring what was a despicable act, I think advances the ball.
Yes, the fact that it is a diverse group of people coming together to help solve this problem definitely advances race relations. And quite frankly, I mean, we've been advancing race relations in tiny steps. It's time that we can actually take a large leap.
100% agreed. Hopefully we can get our guest on maybe next week, because that would have been truly involving.
Yeah, I don't know what happened, why he didn't show, but I'm hoping he comes back on. So, we're inviting him publicly to come back on and keep this conversation going.
Yeah, well, but, the dialogue on the show was good. I think it was, spot on, and I hope our listeners enjoyed the conversation. We'll certainly be doing it next week, won't we, Dr. Lopkin?
Absolutely. You can hear us live every Friday at 4 at blogtalkradio.com/Carnivore Radio. You can also hear the replay as well as the Carnivore Bites podcast on demand at the Apple Podcasts app, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, xvadio.com/podcasts, and wherever you listen to podcasts.
Fantastic. I think we covered a lot of good material, and like I said, I thought it was a good show. We covered the topic, so we wish we would have had our guests, but we moved ahead, didn't we, Dr. Lopkin?
Right. Good conversation, and we'll see you next week.
Take care.